Hi, I'm Rich with Air Gear. The torque wrench is one of the most important tools you can carry in your Airstream, and it's a big mystery to a lot of people, but it doesn't need to be. I'll show you how to use a torque wrench and why you need to have one at all times. A torque wrench is a calibrated kind of wrench that allows you to make sure that the lug nuts on the wheels of your Airstream are tightened exactly as they're supposed to be. Too loose and they might come off. Too tight and you might break the threads that hold them on and they'll still come off. Either way, it's a disaster. Only with a torque wrench can you be sure that you've tightened the lug nuts correctly. Now you need to tighten the lug nuts every time a wheel is removed. And not only once, but 3 times. That's because these lug nuts take a while before they fully seat and get into their correct positions. And as you roll down the road, they can loosen up. With the torque wrench, you can check that each nut is tightened exactly as it's supposed to be. Whenever a wheel is removed from the Airstream, that's the time you need the torque wrench. For example, if you got a flat tire and you had to change it, or somebody else changed it for you. Anytime the wheel comes off, you need to check the torque at least 3 times, preferably 4. Airstream even puts a sticker right above the wheel well to remind you of this. They suggest that you check the torque when you put the wheel on, then after rolling 10 miles down the road, then after 25 miles down the road, and then again after 50 or 75 miles down the road. Thus, last couple of checks, you're probably going to find that nothing really happens, that the nuts are all properly torqued, but that's what you want. You want to keep checking those lug nuts until you're sure they're no longer moving as you go down the road. Then you know they're properly seated. And the only way you can know that is by having a torque wrench. Now, if you're looking for a torque wrench, don't get a cheap one. Make sure you get a high quality torque wrench. We include a very nice torque wrench with a plastic case in the Air Gear tire changing kit. So if you have this, you're already all set. The first step is to set your torque wrench. To do that, wind the black handle until it reaches 110 foot-pounds. That's the amount recommended for most Airstreams. So I've got my torque wrench and I've got an extension and the correct size socket. Now I'm ready to check the lug nuts for the proper torque. It's really easy. Put the wrench on the nut and then push down until you hear and feel a click. There. Now I know I've reached the proper torque and I can stop tightening the bolt. Let's try it again on another one. There we go. You'll notice when I was tightening the lug nuts, I tried to work in what they call a star pattern. In other words, one nut here, one nut here, one nut here, one nut here, and so on. That helps you get all the lug nuts tightened equally. Another tip, when you're done with your torque wrench, it's very important to wind it back down to 0 on the scale. That's because if you leave it at the torque setting of 110 foot-pounds, eventually it'll compress springs that are inside the torque wrench, and it may not be accurate the next time you use it. So always wind it back down to 0 before you put it away. And any good torque wrench should come with a heavy plastic case like this one. That's to protect the wrench. Always put the wrench back in the torque wrench case because it'll keep it from getting banged around and knocked out of calibration. So that's the basics of using a torque wrench. It's not very difficult, and you should always have a torque wrench with your Airstream whenever you travel.